Afternoon, Cherries fans, and welcome to this latest opposition preview show here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Before I welcome on my special guest, here's a little bit about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. To find out what they can do for you, visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk. Now, after our fantastic result against Aston Villa at Dean Court at the weekend, where Jefferson Lerma put us in charge after 3 minutes, and then Kieffer made it 2-0 with 10 minutes to go, we travelled to, of all places, the Etihad to play Manchester City. Of course, we played Man City, if anybody remembers, back in the old Division 2. But of course, they're a lot different beasts now. To preview this game, it is a pleasure to welcome onto the show David Mooney from the Blue Moon podcast. Afternoon, David. How are you?
Going well. Bit warm, but we're getting there, aren't we?
Yeah, it is the middle of a heat wave as well. So, yeah, good to have you with us. And one of the easier teams to support in the Premier League, let's say.
Yeah, but it's not always been that, has it? That's like, I mean, like I'm 34. I've not had it. I've had it on easy street for the last 15 years. I'll give you that. But
Yeah.
before that, no.
Going back, so actually, let's cover off some of those difficult days. So, of course, Man City around about 1997, 98 did go through some difficult times, and I don't know if some of our younger followers won't remember this, but actually went down to what is League One.
Yeah.
What was the whole
those were the
story?
days. Well, like the story actually starts probably about early 90s as a kind of a benchmark. So I think the final season before the Premier League was introduced. I think it was that year. It might have been the year before. Either way, City finished above United. So we had City. I think City finished fourth or fifth, and United finished fifth or sixth. And like going into the 90s, the two clubs were very, very even in terms of their league position. United had spent a lot of money in the late 80s. City hadn't really spent a lot of money in that time, but they had a good crop of youngsters that were coming through. They just won the FA Youth Cup, and things were looking really rosy. And then I can't explain how bad the sequence of mismanagement was that went through. Peter Reid was the manager. He was doing all right. The football wasn't particularly entertaining, but they were getting results at times, and they were mid-table Premier League by the time the Premier League came in. The chairman at the time, Peter Swales, brought in a fellow called John Maddock, who came in as general manager. And when someone comes in above the manager, there's time. Like the manager's time is nearly at an end.
Yeah.
So Reid ended up being sacked. They brought in Brian Horton, who at the time was a bit of an unknown. He'd managed Oxford, but he'd never taken a top league job and that sort of thing. And his football was really, really entertaining. But City didn't win a lot of games, so they ended up finishing. This was back in the days of a 22 team Premier League. So they ended up finishing kind of like they were about 5 or 6 points above the relegation zone in both the Horton seasons. Peter Swales was ousted as chairman. Francis Lee came in as former City striker, came in as chairman, and he appointed Alan Ball as manager, which is genuinely the single worst managerial appointment we've ever had. The first 10 games of the 95-96 season, City drew 1 and lost 9. And they were bottom of the Premier League for a good run. They nearly stayed up. They actually went down by wasting time against Liverpool on the final day. They could catch Sheffield Wednesday, Coventry, or I think Southampton. Sheffield Wednesday needed a draw and they were safe. The others were on level points with City, but with a better goal difference. And they both drew. And the message got from the stands that one of them was losing. So a 2-2 draw for City was in theory good enough. So they started wasting time by the corner flag. And the truth was, it wasn't good enough. And it was like they were going. So they wasted time to safely go down to what is now the Championship. They go down to the Championship. They expect you would expect a team that's just been in the Premier League to bounce back up or to at least do well. They finished mid-table. Frank Clark was the manager by this stage, and he wasn't inspiring people. By I think February the next season, when they sacked Clark and brought in Joe Royle, City were bottom of what was Division 1 at the time. And they went down on the final day when they needed the second to last game of the season. They played QPR, and if you search on YouTube when everyone's finished watching this video, search on YouTube for the greatest own goal of all time, and you will come up with Jamie Pollock. Jamie Pollock, that goal. He does it. He intercepts the pass. He flicks it up into the air to intercept it, and he just goes to head it back to the goalkeeper. Except he heads it over the goalkeeper. It puts QPR 2-1 up. We ended up salvaging a 2-2 draw, but it meant going into the final day of the season. Our fate was out of our own hands. We needed to win and hope that one of Port Vale or Portsmouth lost, and they both won. So City won on the final day. They both won. Everything stayed as it was, and City went down to the third tier. And they ended up playing their third tier season in the same year that United won the treble. And there's never been kind of a bigger disparity between the two Manchester clubs. And it was, it's easy to look back on it now quite nostalgically because we all know that things turned out all right in the end. But at the time, it wasn't particularly entertaining.
No, but you did manage to bounce straight back with a win against Gillingham at Wembley as well. We've had Vince Bartram on this show as well, and of course he was in goal for Gillingham that day. What was your perspective as a City fan?
Well, I was on a school trip, so I was in Anglesey. And my dad, God bless him, drove from Manchester to Anglesey to pick me up. And then we went on to Wembley to watch the game. And then he drove back to Manchester to spend the night there. And then back to Anglesey and back to Manchester to drop me off back at the campsite again. So like he must have done a round trip about 600 miles over 2 days. But like, so it was we were 2-0 down. We were 2-0 down on 90 minutes, and I was ready to basically say, look, listen, go back to the campsite in Anglesey, get me things, and we're going home. Because I had United fans in the tent the week before they'd won the European Cup against Bayern Munich the way they did. So that whole situation happens. The 2-0 down on 90 minutes, and Kevin Olwick scores kind of as the stoppage time board goes up. Paul Dickoff equalises in 95 minutes. It was kind of like the Aguero moment of the 90s for City anyway. And extra time, nothing happened, and then penalties. I never go into a penalty shootout confident, but there was something about that day that just the way that City had come back. Because at this time, there was no evidence in my entire lifetime that City did things and City came back from things. They always let you down. That was my experience of it. So when they were 2-0 down, I was just like, well, that's City. That's what they do. They build you up to knock you down, and then they equalised, and it was genuinely the first time in my lifetime that they achieved something, and they achieved what I wanted them to, and I got to enjoy a City game for the. I'd been a season ticket holder for I think 2 years by this stage, and all I'd known is relegations. That's it. I'd seen one relegation, and I thought they were not going to bounce back at this first time of asking, and they did. And to be honest with you, they ended up going back up to the Premier League the following season, largely off the back of that playoff final win. They just used the momentum. They were not, when they went back up to what's now the Championship. They weren't the second best team in there. There were some teams that were a lot better than City that year, but they just used the momentum to finish second in the league and go back up. And then suddenly they were in the Premier League and they were getting battered every week again because they just weren't good enough to be back up there.
But you are now what Man City is, which is, a side who are constantly competing for the title, winning that title all the time. Of course, you've recently signed Erling Haaland as well. Do tell us a little bit more about the story about that, because it's quite interesting. Of course, Alf Inge Haaland played for City as well.
Yeah. Well, he played in that Premier League year where we got battered every week and went down. It was a masterstroke in foresight of signing a player whose son would go on to be one of the best young strikers in the world. It's weird. We have. I guess all clubs have this sort of history anyway. But there's a good few names that have been father and son that have played for City, so it's really nice to have Erling and Alfie in there. And if I'm being honest, I don't really remember Alfie Haaland that fondly. I was like, they did a video recently where they showed Erling Haaland some of Alfie's highlights, and I thought, well, you're gonna have to go to find some here. I don't remember him doing much. And then there was a load of tough tackles and a lot of challenges that he put in, where he basically just left a foot in and kicked the other player. And I'm like, that's not the Alfie Haaland I remember. I remember Alfie Haaland being a bit of a soft touch in the middle of the pitch. So obviously I'm wrong about that, because there's enough video footage out there of him booting players into the air. And Erling's kind of like a little bit different to that. So, I mean, the last kind of father-son that I can think of that played for City, and I might be wrong here, there might have been another son since. But the last one I can think of are Peter and Kasper Schmeichel, because everyone forgets that Peter Schmeichel had a season at City in 2002, and then Kasper came through the academy because his dad was at City, and he played about 4 or 5 games under Sven-Göran Eriksson in 2007 before we decided he wasn't good enough and shipped him on, and then he goes on to be a Premier League winning goalkeeper himself. So these things sometimes do go on like that. So it's nice to have that kind of symmetry and that new generation of player. I mean, it really, really scared me the other day when I realised that, because I remember Alfie Haaland playing for City, and I remember him being the club captain and stuff. And I worked out how old Erling was when Alfie scored his last goal for City, and that last goal was on like the 26th of December in the year 2000, and Erling was 4 months old. And now he's leading the line for City. It just makes me feel inadequate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What have I achieved in that time? Absolutely nothing.
Of course, you are favourites to win the Premier League again this year, understandably so. But there is one thing that Pep wants more than anything else, and that's the Champions League. Would City fans, say, okay, if we don't win the Premier League, that's fine, if we win the Champions League?
That's a really difficult question, because over the last, I mean, this is going to sound like I don't want to swear on your channel, so I'm not going to, but it's going to sound like a really, really horrid answer, because okay, I'm going to sound like a right wanker now. I'm sorry about that. But I've reassessed how I view success at City now, because going into when the takeover happened and they had Mancini as manager, and they were building towards those first trophies. Success was very much winning things and winning trophies and kind of taking the silverware in any way possible. And that came from a line of thinking that I'd never seen City lift a major trophy. City, before the 2011 FA Cup, City's last major trophy was in 1976. So I was born in '87. There was 11 years after their trophy that I was born, and they'd not won anything in my lifetime. They'd not even in my lifetime they'd not even made a semi-final or a final of one of the knockout competitions. And so for me, for the early years of the takeover, success was very much you need a trophy. You need to see this team lift something and to win something. And it was fantastic. Watching them beat Stoke and lift the FA Cup in 2011, fantastic. Watching Aguero do what he did in 2012. I mean, I've never felt anything like it. And I didn't think I would feel anything like it until last season happened again. But the truth is now, how I look at success for City is not how much they've won at the end of the season. And I realise, like, I already know, like, viewers, how much of a privileged position that is, because there's a lot of football fans who don't get to see their team lift anything at all in their lifetime. So talking about, not judging a season by how much you win, like, that is privilege. I know it. But the truth is, for City, what is a successful season is where they are at the end of the season. And what I mean by that is last season is deemed a success because they won the Premier League, and it could on the final day, it could quite easily have gone the wrong way and would have won the title. But their season would still have been quite successful. It would have been a much better season, for instance, than the 2019-20 pandemic season, when, the truth be told, City were not in the running for the Premier League. They were not in the running for the Champions League. They were knocked out of the Champions League by Lyon in that round-robin tournament that they did behind closed doors. And they just did not play well. They were for most of the season, they were a good 20 points behind Liverpool at the top of the table. There was no chance of them winning the league. So they weren't there or thereabouts. But in that season, they won the League Cup. So, like, on paper, it's a more successful season than last season would have been had they not won the title. But last season would have been there. They were close to the Champions League. It was a last minute equaliser against Madrid that did for them, and the momentum in that game swung. They were. The FA Cup semi-final was a bit of a write-off because of the team that he named and how Liverpool's week had gone. But they were still there. They were in the semi-final of the FA Cup. They were there in the Premier League for the final day of the season. All of those competitions, they were not there in 2020. But like, they won a cup that year. So people would look at it and go, well, you won a cup. What more? Like, how much more successful do you want to be? So there has to be a balance, I think, between how well you play and how entertaining the football is, and where you are at the end of the season competing for things. And you actually win. Because the truth is, City could win the Champions League by, like, look at how Chelsea won it in, 2012? Like, they weren't the best team in Europe, but they kept winning games, and they maybe didn't deserve to win a couple of games, but they got a breakaway goal and they defended well and that sort of thing. You could win the Champions League in the fight. City could have played Chelsea in that Champions League final a couple of years ago, and City did not play. Chelsea fully deserved it. They were the much better team throughout that 90 minutes. But had Chelsea's shot not gone in, and had City scored a deflected winner, like, you go, well, there you go. You got your game plan right. Actually, you didn't get your game plan right. You just got lucky. And so football has this way of kidding us that success is based purely on what you've won and kind of have you achieved your aims from the start of the season. But actually, the bounce of the ball can go one way or another, and you can win a game or lose a game. Like the title last season. Look at that Everton game that City played. They scored the only goal of the game because an Everton defender, I think it was Will Keane, flicked the ball onto Phil Foden instead of clearing it when it just seemed like a normal clearance. And then Rodri basically punches the ball in the penalty area, and and like on any other day, a penalty's given, Everton score it, and City drop points that afternoon. So, like, there's so much of the bounce of the ball that you can't always adjudicate for. So, when it comes back, to bring it back round to your original question, if you don't win the Premier League, but you do win the Champions League, it's still kind of like, how have you won it? Have you deserved to win it? Have you been, the better team in all the rounds up until the final? Have you, like, if they don't win the Premier League, have they at least been competitive in the Premier League? I'm quite happy with a season where City win absolutely nothing, but as long as they're competitive, and we have to accept that there is pressure with City, and there's pressure on City to achieve what they achieve because they've spent a hell of a lot of money. They've spent money on some of the best players in the world to assemble one of the best teams in the world. So with that comes the weight of expectation that you've got to win things. When actually the weight of expectation should be, are you there or thereabouts at the end of the season? Because in 2020 they weren't, but last season they were, and that's kind of where I'm at with it. So I don't really mind if City win nothing or if they win everything. Well, I do mind if they win everything. That'd be fantastic. But if they win nothing, as long as they've competed, then it's not a problem. So Champions League over Premier League, I don't really mind. Just be competitive in both.
Of course, we both started with 2-0 wins. Of course, City won 2-0 at West Ham, 2 goals from that main man. But also, we got an unexpected win against Aston Villa at home. And of course, great start that we've had. But it's going to be difficult these next 3 games because after City, we do have Arsenal and Liverpool. How do teams like Bournemouth cope coming up against? Because City are the only side in the top 6 we haven't beaten. But how
Yeah.
do we cope with that now? And is there a gap that's forming that's even bigger than the last time we was here?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the goods and not goods for the Premier League and for
Mhm.
football and where teams are, but the truth is, um, we should play this game at the weekend, and 9 times out of 10, City should win it. And like, it's just
Yeah.
on paper, that's how it is. City's budget is much bigger than Bournemouth's. They're in the fortunate position of being able to spend a lot of money where Bournemouth aren't in that position. So I get it. I get the
Mhm.
disparity. Um, but equally, that's not to say that upsets don't happen and that things like don't go like there is a 1 time out of 10, and sometimes you just have everything just has to go right for you on the day. It's that bounce of the ball thing again.
Yeah.
Um, the problem, I don't know if this affects you, but that like, it only occurred to me again this morning. Like Bournemouth have literally never beaten City
Mm.
in entire recorded history, and that goes back to. I mean, we didn't play each other that much before the Premier League era,
Yeah.
but like in the few times that we did, it was. I think the best was a 0-0 draw at Dean
Mhm.
Court, and that was. I mean, there's a story behind that as well because we had 2 players sent off that day. One of them claims it was for walking aggressively towards the referee, and he got a second yellow card for that. I don't think that's particularly true, but anyway, we're getting away from the topic. So how do Bournemouth go about beating City at the weekend? The truth is,
Mm.
you've got to be perfect. You've just got to.
Yeah.
Everything has to be right. And you need to get into those. You need to have those moments where City just miss chances because City will create chances. So if they create them, you've got to have a goalkeeper who's on form and making saves,
Mhm.
defenders who are making blocks, and just kind of get in and around the box and stop them doing it. I'm like last season, I could have answered this question a lot easier because City didn't have a centre forward, so
Mhm.
they had a setup that I knew what they were going to do. The truth is, I don't really know how City are going to approach this game. Guardiola surprised me at weekend when they played West Ham in how he set up. What he did was City have had a lot of problems with West Ham on the counter attack recently, especially at the London Stadium.
Yeah.
And in order to stop that, he didn't play any fullbacks. He named them on the team sheet, but as soon as City got the ball, they made a midfield 3 with Rodri, and that actually made a midfield 5 with
Mhm.
Gundogan and De Bruyne also kind of in that position. And it just meant that playing 2 at the back and then 5 in midfield meant that West Ham just had no way of getting out. And when they brought players into the middle to try and cope with the City players that were all kind of putting pressure on their midfield,
Yeah.
it meant City could get the ball out to Grealish and Foden on the wings and cause problems. So if you try and play with a low block and try and kind of keep men deep and cut out the spaces, he might well do that again. And I'm no football tactician, and to be honest with you, I haven't got the foggiest how to deal with that. It's like I don't know if you came up against a team where they'd gone, we're not going to play fullbacks today. We're going to play 5 midfielders, kind of like have 3 of them as holding midfielders. I don't know how you play around that. It's not a normal setup. It's not something that we expect to see. So if you if you try and get the ball down and play, he'll love that because he likes his teams to accept the pressure and then play through the lines. So if you try and put pressure on high up, he'll absolutely love that happening.
Mhm.
You might create 1 or 2 chances doing that, but equally the theory is that City will create a lot of chances at the other end as well.
Yeah.
If you sit in deep and try and hold on to what you've got and play a low block, he might do the fullbacks thing, which I don't know what the answer is. So how Bournemouth go about beating City this weekend, I'd be honest with you, I haven't got the foggiest. That's not to say it's not possible. That's not to say that. I mean, that's not to say that all the staff at Bournemouth have not been spending the last week going right. Well, if they do this, we can do this and put players here. I think that you need two things. You need a good deal of luck, and you need a perfect game plan.
Yeah.
The luck I can see happening. The game plan, I haven't got a clue where to begin with. So I'm sorry, that's useless for you.
To be honest, likewise, midfield is definitely our strongest position. But what Scott Parker's gonna do, I haven't a clue. I haven't
Yeah.
a clue. But great win against Aston Villa last weekend.
The thing is, if you're
Still
going to stay
possible.
up this season, then
Yeah,
you're not like anything you get from this game is a bonus. That's not
yeah,
that's not what
exactly.
the situation is it? It's like if you're going to stay up, you need the points against Aston Villa. You need the points against the other promoted sides. You don't like. You might get points from City, you might get points from Liverpool, you might get points from Arsenal, but if you don't, not the end of the world as long as you win the other games. It's like but there's a long way of the season to go. I'd much rather play City second and have 36 games to stay up than play City second last and need 6 points. You know what I mean?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. And that's the way I saw it. We've still got a little while. And to be fair, we don't expect to win these next 3 games. We probably look at it before the season started. We said, well, that's going to be 3 defeats. We could be bottom of the league with 0 points. So that was why that was so welcome at the weekend. But it gives us a bit more time in the transfer market as well, because once September comes, we'll have a little bit longer to build that team, and of course we'll have one less game against City,
Yeah.
Liverpool, and Arsenal.
And
To look
I mean, also the other side of it is, I said before about how City got up into the Premier League in the year 2000 was
Mhm.
momentum. You're still carrying momentum. Promotion gives you momentum.
Yeah.
Winning on the opening day gives you momentum. And so I don't think I'm not expecting City to go into this game and just roll Bournemouth over. I'm expecting City to win. I'm not
Mhm.
expecting them to have an easy time of winning because the number of times I can't explain what it is. I don't like playing newly promoted teams in the first couple of games of the season because they're still in that mindset of we have got nothing to lose right now because
Yeah.
we've got a lot of the season to go. We have just come up, and the thing that killed City in that 2000-2001 season was that the opening day of the season, of the first day back in the Premier League, they played Charlton, who had been in Division 1 with them and come up with them, and Charlton battered them 4-0. So it just
Mm.
killed all the momentum they had, and they spent the entire season then struggling in the league. If they'd won that opening day, they might have done what Ipswich did and qualified for Europe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's that momentum, and if something, we can get a miraculous result. However, I don't know how, but it could really, really, and I think it'll put all the doubters as well. There was quite a few doubters at the start of the season, a few people that were concerned about Scott Parker's whole demeanour. But I think that's all been sorted now.
And can we talk about his jacket though? That
Yeah,
was
go for
that was not a good
it.
jacket. Like
It's a weird one, isn't it? I don't
yeah,
know.
who's picked that one out?
I don't know what happens in his who his stylist is, but I think he needs to get them sacked. But
Yeah,
Jane,
he also. This is a tangent and a half, and I'm sorry about this, but do you watch the Bond films?
yes, yeah.
Yeah, Die Another Day. He looks like Gustav Graves, the villain from Die Another Day, and I can't. I mean,
Honestly, it does. To be fair, it's he's
sorry, I've
he,
completely derailed this conversation.
his wardrobe is interesting. But final question: how do you think it's gonna go this weekend? To be honest, I've already got the prediction in my head.
Yeah, I think I don't. I think City will win. Like I say, I
Mhm.
think they should win. I think if they don't win, it'll be a surprise. And I think City. I think it'll be a usual City game. They'll have a lot of the ball. They'll create a fair few chances. I'm actually quite excited. It'll be the first time I'll see Haaland in the flesh. So it'll be.
Yeah.
I'm quite excited to see that. And I make no apologies of being on an opposition fan channel and saying I hope he scores and scores and scores and scores because
Yeah.
he's a super robot cyborg thing for scoring goals, and I just want to see it in person. And I'm sorry that it's like it could be anybody turning up this weekend. I don't really care who it is. I just want to see lots of Haaland goals. So I hope he's in good form. I hope he's getting in behind and causing problems. And I hope it's a good game. I mean, that we have probably different expectations of what a good game is. But I hope that City are able to get the ball down and play it a little bit, because it's a good entertaining watch. I mean, the weird thing is, a lot of neutrals say, and I in a weird way I get it. A lot of neutrals will say, I don't find City an entertaining team. They're quite a boring team to watch. But they're not. There's two things to that. The first one is they're quite often boring because the opposition are pretty scared of what City will do to them if they open the game up. So the opposition will kill the game. No problem with that whatsoever. And the second thing is that, like, you're neutrals. Like, you're not supposed to find City entertaining. You're supposed to find your own team entertaining. So when neutrals say, I find City's pass, try and unlock the door quite dull, City fans don't, and that's fine. So if neutrals find it boring, fine. If City fans enjoy it, fine. You know, everybody gets to say something about it, and you know, we all get to disagree on what we see. I would be surprised if Bournemouth turned up at the weekend and went, let's make this an entertaining game. Because if you do, then like what tends to happen is teams that try and open it up and play a bit tend to get battered. So by all means, try and make it boring and try and make it horrid for the neutral, because then you might get something out of the game.
I think that's what Eddie used to do, really. You know, whereas that worked against the likes of Arsenal, against Man United, you know, against
but everyone beats United these days, don't they?
But Liverpool's another one. That 4-3 win, you know, one of the best matches, if not the best match that, you know, we've ever seen at Dean Court. Albeit, you know, we've had ones that probably mean a lot more since, of course, the Forest game, the Bolton game, but
that's different though, isn't it? It's there's special things, there's special nights that don't mean anything to you sometimes as a football fan, and that's good. I'm here for that.
Yeah, but I'm going to go. To be honest, I think you will see Haaland score. I think we'll get beat 3-1, but we will be the first team to score against you this year. Which, you know, let's be honest, let's take something from that.
I like that, because it means the Community Shield doesn't count. So there we go.
Oh yeah, of course. I completely forgot about that one.
It definitely does. Like, just means it doesn't count. That's good. I like that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on, David. It's been an absolute pleasure, and all the very, very best, especially with the Champions League. You know, I think it would be good to see City win it. And I think that's probably going to be something that they're going to say to Pep, please do, you know, bring that trophy home. But
I hope they say stay on until you win it, and then I hope they never win it.
You'll just be dominant in the Premier League for the next 20 years.
He's in the last year of his contract, so like that's another story. Like that's kind of gone under the radar. The fact that in the end of this season, like he just leaves, and unless he signs an extension in the next 9 months or so, this is going to be his final year. So, you know, I don't want that. I don't want this to be the end of it.
Getting relegated with Stoke and Reading, and then ended up in the same division as us back in 1999. Feels a long time away now, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, those I would say halcyon days, but we remember them with rose-tinted glasses because, like I said before, everything turned out all right in the end. Yeah,
it did. You know, and we can only ever dream that we might be in your position one day. It could happen.
I wonder. You got me thinking now. The number of teams that City played in that third tier, because they've only been in the third tier once that year. The number of teams that they played in that division that they've also played in the Premier League. Because Blackpool, they played that year, and Blackpool have been up since.
Swansea.
So I don't think Swansea were down there then. I think Swansea were a bit lower down. Yeah. But obviously they've come up and been there. Wigan, Stoke and Reading, Wigan, Oldham. I mean, Oldham, they played in the Premier League before they dropped down there, but Oldham were in that league. So there was plenty of future Premier League teams in that league as well. Yeah. So and of course Bournemouth now.
Yeah, exactly. We were there, but you know, we spent a little bit longer than you did in that.
It's a journey. It's a journey. That's what it is.
It is. We're here now, and hopefully we can stay. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, David, and
Thank you.
All the very, very best for the season. And I don't think you need best wishes, really. I think you probably, you probably got enough, haven't you?
Should be all right.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining me on this opposition preview show. Please do remember to hit the like, the subscribe, and the bell button below to be alerted to any new videos we do here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Please do check out our season preview show with Harry Redknapp. All the details are below. We've also had many special guests on. So we had Simon Day. He was talking about the Fast Show and Spurs. We've had Mark Housey, had a really interesting conversation with him about refereeing in the Premier League. We've also had the likes of Sean Teal. We've had Paul Mitchell, Effa Cuckoo, and lots more. Vince Bartram as well, who was mentioned, of course, in this show. He was playing for Gillingham at the time against Man City. So please do check those out. Do let us know in the comments how we're doing. And we'll see you in the next video. Up the cherries, and I'll see you then.